Hi, this is Mike Ignatowski, the creator of the GreenFox spreadsheet, the spreadsheet that uses Excel programming to make the spreadsheet behave like an electronic baseball score sheet or scorebook, and it automatically computes the game stats, which can be a big-time time saver. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you find this video helpful.
This video is going to be the first video in a series of videos, which I'm not exactly sure how many they're going to be yet, but it's going to go over in step by step how to create a custom league using GreenFox version 3, and then another video or two will be on how to play or score the game using GreenFox scorebook or score sheet for that league game. And then the next video would be regarding how to save the stats and track the cumulative stats in that league. So let's get started. So the very beginning of this process is you need to get the version of the GreenFox spreadsheet. So in order to get that, you need to be in this GreenFox Facebook group. I'm going to jump here to this is the GreenFox baseball score sheet spreadsheet Facebook group. It's a private group, but pretty much anybody can join. Just answer the questions and agree to the rules. They're pretty basic. But anyway, this is the Facebook group, and this is the only public place where you can download the latest version of the spreadsheet. And what you want to do is when you're here, go to this files area. So within the files area, you want to scroll down, make sure you're looking at the most recent ones first, which is, I believe, the default, and find the first one that starts with the word GreenFox. So we're down here is this one right now. You go click on these three dots. If you click this, it'll take you to the posting, which you can look at, but you can't download it there. So let's go here. You just say download. And I just downloaded it to get ready for this video, but you save it someplace. And as you can see there, you need another file also for a custom league. So that one's called the GF2 underscore retro rosters. I'm not sure if it'll always be GF2, but that's what it is right now. But it's has the word retro rosters in it, and you'll need that one also. So same thing. Click here, download it. Now once you download them, so here they are. Before you can really use them, it depends on how your computer works, but for many people, you need to first basically tell your computer that they're safe to use, because they have programming in it that a lot of virus detection-ish software tries to protect you against, which is a good thing. Anyway, so you right-click on the file, you go to the properties, and at the bottom here, or someplace, you'll see this, and you want to click this unblock. Here it kind of tells you. If you need to unblock it before it'll give you access to the programming inside the spreadsheet. So you click this and say OK. And the same with this other one. It has, you can tell by the M at the end of this, XLSM, that means it has macro code in it. And that's how all the intelligence is built in. So same thing, click here, unblock, OK. And once you do that, if you try to do it again, you'll see it's gone now. So anyway, that's step one. Okay, so now when you open up the GreenFox spreadsheet, which is where you want to start, it'll probably look like this. You'll start on this score sheet page. And before we get started here, using some advice I got from my older brother many years ago, when you're trying to solve a problem, it's sometimes best to start with the answer. So for this custom league, what is the answer? And so I made this on sheet 1 here. I just created this extra sheet. I kind of showed what my league is going to look like. So this here kind of is the name of my league. I broke it up into these two groups, kind of this Americans League and the Nationals League, and they each have 4 teams. You can see These are historical teams from real seasons, but this, they're not all the same season. So, and it's this really is a good way to kind of figure out the layout of your league, at least from kind of the standings view in a way. You can see like this has two leagues, or in GreenFox terms, these are called sub leagues because I have one league overall, and similar to the American and the National League and Major League Baseball, this would be one sub league, and this is the other sub league. And within each of these sub leagues, there's essentially one division. They each have 4 teams in it. So you could argue and say, well, let's just have one league with 2 divisions, which you could, but for reasons you'll see in a minute when we get into the GreenFox, it's probably better to use this 2 sub leagues because it makes the standings look better. You'll see that in a second. So that's the first step, is really to lay out your league kind of in how your standings would look, to give you an idea, so you know how many teams, what the names of your teams are, if you have any of these sub leagues or divisions, and it's nice to get that all figured out before you start. Okay, so now that we got our league layout figured out, let's start doing something. So go to the score sheet, which looks like this, but actually I want to jump down here to this LG help, which stands for league help, and jump here first. This has helpful information on all types of leagues. These first 2 focus on historical season leagues, or basically for replays, historical team season replays, or a whole league season replay. That's what these are about, and I've already made a video about those. What we're going to talk about today is just this custom league, and this does list the, I don't know, whatever it is, 17 steps to do it, which we've already begun by basically downloading the program, but I'm not going to be referring back to this each step. I just want to let you know that it's here and it's helpful. So let's get back to the spreadsheet. Step 1 is going to be get this spreadsheet into kind of league mode, and so you can see up here where the score sheet mode is and the cell below, and now it says free play. If you hover on it, it lists the 3 different league modes. If you look at that bottom one, it says custom mode, and its description is almost whatever you want it to be, but you have to provide the info. Although GreenFox does have some features that will help you out. So let's just click this. It confirms whether you want to go into league mode. Say yes. It says it's going to add a bunch of new sheets, and that the mode will have a question mark in it until it's all tweaked out. So we'll say OK. Now, if we go back to the spreadsheet, you can see it has a question mark league, but we can't really do anything yet until we build our league. But you can see at the bottom here, it added all these sheets, and so now we can start doing our work. We'll click the league sheet, and the best place to start here is where it says start here. Enter the league mode. So if you click it, again, all these little red things, there's helpful info. So if we click in this mode square, we get this little drop down, and here are the 3 modes for the leagues. We're choosing this bottom one, custom league. So we do that. The next thing it does is prompt me for how many teams. And if we remember, I had 8 teams in that league. Okay. And it goes through some Excel gyrations, and then it shows me this somewhat wordy pop-up window. It recommends that I read and understand the whole thing. But I'll summarize it. But basically it says, over here in this yellow block, it has numbered it for 8 rows for my 8 teams, and that's where I'll enter the names of my teams. I'll also enter an ID for each team, and it tells me here to leave the retro ID and div columns blank. These second 2 columns will leave blank at this time. And once I enter them all, that the validate league button up here at the top here, that will help guide me through the rest of the steps. And if I wanted to change my mind and do something else, I can always hit this reset league button. It'll triply confirm that you really want to do it, because it does reset everything in the league. But when you're just starting out, it really isn't that much to lose. So let's get started. Now here, if you did want to change the number of teams, you could actually click this 8. It'll say, hey, you really want to switch it? And if it did, it would prompt me, but I'm going to say no, because I know it's 8. So the first team I'm going to enter, if you remember from that thing, was the 1970 Baltimore Orioles. So I'm going to enter that. I don't have to have the 1970, but I'm going to put it on it just so for clarification for myself. And then the ID. We hover on this ID cell with a red triangle. It just says it's got to be 2, 3, or 4 characters with no special characters or spaces. So typically it's just some abbreviation for your team that makes sense. So I'm going to put BAL for Baltimore. Alright, I'm going to skip ahead and finish entering these teams. Okay, fast forward. Now I have all my team names entered. I have all my IDs except the Dodgers. So I'm going to do that now. Go with LA. Once I hit enter here, it detects that all my teams and IDs have been entered, and it says good news, they're valid. If I had any duplicates here or IDs were too long or duplicates there, it would have told me so. And now it gives me a tip of what to do next, which is enter this league name, this ID, the sub-leagues and divisions. And it says when you click OK in the process of entering these things, you can always click the validate league settings to continue the process. It's kind of like what it told us before. So I'm going to click OK. And it's actually going to automatically do the validation right now. And it says, hey, your league ID is bad. Fix it. It can be from 2 to 10 characters, whatever. So I'm going to go up here and enter that. Sorry for the squeaky chair. So my league name was my 70s Super 8 League. And so my ID, I'm just going to call it my 70s 8. It doesn't matter too much. This really isn't shown pretty much anywhere. It's all behind the scenes, so don't get too caught up on it, but it's helpful if it makes some sense. Down here, this sub-league, here's the info on that. It says I have to choose 1 or 2. If you remember, I had 2 sub-leagues, the Americans and the Nationals is what I called it. So I'm going to choose 2 there, and then this divisions per sub-league is 1. There are 2 divisions in the league, but overall, but each sub-league contains 1. So I'm going to choose 1 there. And now that I'm done with this, I'm going to click this validate league settings button. But before I do, I want to point out over here, this table here is the sub-league and division custom names thing. You can see once I've entered my league name here, it automatically copies it over here. And here is where you would enter your names for your different sub-leagues and different divisions. So once I hit this validate, you can say, hey, it's missing a sub-league name. Go fill it in and retry. So the table cells are in column Q, which is what I just said. But you can see it put these NA values in for divisions 2, 3, and 4 for both sub-leagues because it knows there's only one division, so don't worry about those. So if you remember my L sub-league, which I'll hover on this, it's called L sub-league because it's, when you look at the standings, it's the league on the left, or the sub-league on the left. And the R sub-league means just what you think, which is it's for the one on the right. So in mine, this L sub-league was the Americans. I can call it league if I want to, I guess. And the division, this is only one division. I could call it the same thing, but if you look over here in this I don't know if it has it in the help or not. But what I found is if the division name doesn't provide anything unique, I just call it team, and you'll see why in a second. So here, let's the Nationals League. And right now, if I hit validate again, let's just do it for fun. It's going to say, hey, you're missing this R1 division name. So fix it. So here, I'm going to call that also team. It doesn't matter if I've already used it. So now I'm going to hit the validate again. So I think I've done with that. So now it says invalid division number, and it highlights this column here. Please provide a division for each team in your league from the drop-down list, and then retry the validate league settings button. Okay. So now what it said was, these settings were good, our team names and IDs were good, the names of our sub-leagues and divisions were good, but now we need to assign those teams to those sub-leagues and divisions. And you can see now there's this drop down over here, and it gives me two choices, L1 or R1. And because my L1 is my Americans League, all the American League teams, I'm going to pick L1, which would be, the Orioles, the A's, the Yankees, and the Red Sox. And all these other ones are the R. All these National League teams. I'll just click on. So now these are all done. And now we can try this league settings again. Before I click that, I'll also mention this here is kind of redundant with that league help sheet, which this also kind of tells you the steps, although it's a little bit condensed, but it basically contains the same steps to do to create your custom league. So now I'm going to try the validate again. And now it says, oops, no roster data found, so it's aborting the process. But that's really what we'd expect. So it's kind of good news. It got farther than it did before. So it says, please enter your roster data and retry. Let me click OK. It brings up this pop-up menu, or not menu, but window having to deal with the rosters. So let's see what that means. Alright, so here we are. This is looking at, if you see here at the bottom, this is the rosters sheet. It's blank. But let's look at this pop-up window that it's showing us now. So the first thing it says is on number 1, it says how to enter your roster data. First, you need to unlock the rosters data sheet by clicking the pink button right up here that says unlock. So we'll have to do that first. Then number 2, where it says enter rosters data using one of these methods. So let's see which one would apply for this league. So A, for historical teams, use the load historical team roster, the green button in the upper left. And that's what we're going to use because we have historical teams. But that's just for completeness. Let's look at the other one. It says for historical players, you may use the player copy paste. That would be if you had teams that were made up of real players but not on their regular teams. Like if you had a draft of the 1975 players for your own team, so that all the players would be mixed up compared to their regular team from 1975. And then the last one talks about for non-historical teams, maybe you've got your beer league softball teams in here or something, that data would all have to be entered by you because the retro sheet data that GreenFox has access to doesn't know anything about that. Step 3, it would say lock the rosters data by clicking the validate and lock. So once it's all entered, we could validate and lock. Then it says important here, not all columns are required, but these ones are. But since we're going to be entering this historical team roster stuff, it'll take care of this automatically. So let's just talk through what we're going to do. We're going to basically load this historical rosters using the retro sheet data, but what we're going to find out is those rosters are complete, and a lot of times based on whatever game you're using, you're not going to have all those players on your teams. Your game may allow that, but many don't. So for my little scenario here, let's pretend I'm using my Stratomatic cards for those years, and each team maybe has 25 or 26 guys or 24, whatever it's got, but they may have had 45 or 50 guys on their roster throughout the season in actuality when they played. So what we'll do is load these rosters and then basically pare them down so it matches what we have for our game. So let's see how that works. Okay, so now that we've gone through that, let's actually see how it's done. So I'll close this, and if I jump the gun and click this green button, it'll say, oh, first you got to unlock this roster sheet to do it. Okay, so let's unlock the rosters data. You can see now it switched this cell to say unlocked, and while it is unlocked, you won't be able to load a game into the score sheet, which is fine. But so when you're done, you click the validate and lock button to relock it. Okay. Now I think, oh, now I want to load my set 1970 Orioles. So if I click this, it says error, could not open the Excel spreadsheet with the name starting with GF2 retro rosters. It says you need that. You can get it from the Facebook group. Please open it and retry. Okay, so this is where it needs that second file that we downloaded at the beginning, the GF2 retro rosters file. So let's open that file up. So I'm just going to double click it. It'll open, and that's really all I need. I don't need to really do anything with it. How do I minimize this? Okay, so now that's open in the background. So now let's click this button again, and now it launches this historical roster chooser pop-up window, and this is where the magic happens for this. So here, this first combo box or drop down is pick your team in your league. So you can see here I click this, and these are the 8 teams in the league that I've made. So let's start at the top with the Orioles. I picked the Orioles 1970. Over here you can see it puts this team ID right here. So now I want to pick the year from this list. The mouse wheel doesn't work in here if you have that, so you have to use the scroll bar. So that's fine. 1970. Now it doesn't check, it doesn't know that this is 1970 really. It could be, I could have just picked anything. So there's no check of whether you picked the right year. That's on you. So I picked 1970, and once I pick whatever year, it'll list these teams over here. So let's pick 1970. Then I pick the Orioles, and now you can see up here in this area it says historical team roster 1970 Baltimore Orioles. That's what I want. So then I click the load button, and it prompts me and says, hey, are you sure you want to load the 1970 Baltimore Orioles historical rosters for your custom league team named Baltimore Orioles 1970 with this ID, BAL? Yes or no? And I say yes. So you click yes. And you should get this nice little success message here, so that you can load more if you want to. That's what I'm going to do. So you can see here they had 32 players on this 1970 Baltimore Orioles roster, and they're all listed here. So I can move over, but now we can just keep going and do the other 7 teams. But so the next one, I'd say, all right, my other team from 1970 was the Pittsburgh Pirates. So the first thing I want to do is go up here and pick the Pirates. I'm still 1970, but you can see now it deselected the Orioles. So now I gotta find the Pirates over here. Pittsburgh Pirates, 1970. Yeah. Load. Yes. Success. All right. So basically rinse and repeat for the rest of the team. So I'm going to stop the video and jump ahead there. Okay. Now I just finished loading the Dodgers. So now I've loaded all 8 of my teams from the historical rosters sheet. So I'm going to say done. It gives me a little parting gift that says, hey, you loaded some of these, so you may want to modify it before you start your league. For example, you may want to delete your uncarded players or players that played for multiple teams during the season or whatever. Okay, basically it means you probably want to modify this for your game, but you don't have to. So if I look at my 1970 Orioles, you can see it kind of loads these here by hitters then pitchers. But first let's just take a quick look at what it's got here. So this is the historical team they played for. This player ID, which comes from that other data file, the retro sheet data file. Their first and last name, this lineup name, their primary role, hitter, pitcher, or both. Basically both is like Otani. What they bat, what they throw. This multi-team list, it may or may not be helpful here. It doesn't make any difference in the league, actually. It doesn't use this for anything. This positions is a historical account of what positions that person played in that year, so that it can be helpful when you're choosing a sub, and that's where it's actually used in the game. This pitcher role is similar. It uses RP for relief pitcher, SP for starting pitcher, and then SP or RP. The order it shows based on whether the number of appearances, whether they had more starts or relief appearances. But it's could be helpful, so I'd say you should just leave it. In the positions, it also lists whether somebody, in addition to the regular positions, it shows DH if the league had a DH then, which they didn't, or if they were a pinch runner. So you can see that this PR stands for pinch runner. So that's just what's here. So if we want to get started with these Orioles, what we want to do first is I look at my game of what players I have for the 1970 Orioles and pretty much figure out who I don't have. So if I look at my list and it says, okay, I've got, Belanger, if I set them up alphabetically, I don't have Baylor. So the easiest way is to left click over here on this row number to highlight it, and then right click and say delete, and it just removes that row. So similarly, I look at my list and just go down, keep following my own list to say, who don't I have? I don't have this Clay Dalrymple, delete. Bobby Floyd, I could even pick these couple guys in a row. Roger Freed, I don't have any of those guys. Delete. Dave May. But anyway, and similarly for the pitchers. So you do that to kind of finalize your rosters, however you want to modify these so they match what you're going to use for your game. So I'm going to stop the video and we'll jump ahead from here. Okay, fast forward. I've now edited all the historical rosters to match the cards that I have or players for my game, so I'm ready to move on to the next step. But before we do that, I want to mention a couple things in this roster sheet that can be helpful when you're doing these steps. Are these filters up on these column headers? So sometimes it may be just a little bit easier if you wanted to just look at one team. Let's say I wanted to just work on the A's. I could click this filter list and say just show me the A's, and it would just list the A's. If you wanted to then put another one on and say just show me the hitters for the A's, I could just check the H. And these would all, this would kind of just focus in on just show me the A's hitters, depending on how you want to look at it or how you want to do your editing. Sometimes it's a little easier to work on a group at a time. And then you can see it shows this little filter, which ones are active. So I'm just going to hit this clear filter on each of these. Or I could go down here and say select all, but that's the same. So now it's back to all my rosters. So the next thing I wanted, the next step I guess you'd say is, I think I'm done. I want to click this validate. So that's what I'm going to do. Validate and lock rosters. I do that. I get this lovely message. It says duplicate player ID found on roster sheet. End E103 aborting. Please correct and retry. Duplicate player IDs are not allowed in a custom league. And there are two options to correct this. One, if I want to treat these as different players, I could change the ID and lineup name for one of them or delete one of them. Okay, so let's look. So what it did, and then it kind of gives me these standard roster things, which I can just ignore right now. So what it did was it said this is the player ID that's a duplicate, and you can see it's Elrod Hendricks because he played for the 70 Orioles and the 76 Yankees. And what I can do is, because I already said these are players in my league that I want to use, I need to change two things. This player ID, because it says this has to be unique, and this lineup name. The first and last name I don't have to change because it doesn't really get used at this point yet, but so I'm going to ignore that for now. But in other versions or other areas I may use these, and that's why they're here. So what I would probably want to do is I want to change this name. I could change it any way I want to, but I'd like to change it so it makes sense. So in this case for Elrod Hendricks, what I would do is say, alright, I'm going to double click this to get it here. I basically want to say that this is the Baltimore one. So I'm just going to, after his first name, I'm going to put BAL. And his lineup name, and this one I would put Elrod New York Hendricks. And similarly over on this ID, I got to do the same thing somehow. So I'm just going to add it on to the end. Add this NY. I guess I should put NYY because I do have the New York Mets in this league. So I'm going to fix this lineup name too. Okay, so now I made those changes. And I'm going to click this validate. Again, we'll try it one more time. It said, hey, I got the same problem with Johnny Oates. Okay. So I got to do the same thing again. Again, you can modify these however you want to. You could just put a 1 or a 2 at the end, or you could, but I think it's best to make it so that when you look at the lineup name, because that's really what you're going to be using the most, it makes sense. Well, so let's see. Now we got Doc Ellis. So anyway, I'm going to fix these last couple of players up, but and it only shows you one at a time, because once it finds a duplicate, it stops the validation process and puts it in your face. So maybe in future versions I might be able to show all the duplicates at once, but right now it doesn't. So I'm going to go ahead and fix that. I think I have, maybe as I was entering them, I think maybe Ken Holtzman might be one other player that's in both, but this is a a problem you'll run into when you have teams from different seasons, and possibly even the same season, but especially different seasons that are close enough where you have players' careers that overlap multiple teams. So this is a minor, I'll say, inconvenience that you have to deal with if you want to have this player in there for both on both teams.